Sorry. I suddenly got called into work. But I'll make it back in time for our dinner reservation tonight. Today was our anniversary, and we had booked a special dinner at a restaurant we seldom go to. My husband, Thomas, apologized for having to work unexpectedly. I had been looking forward to a special dinner today, so I felt disappointed. I decided to believe his promise that he would make it back in time for the restaurant, but then I didn't hear from him at all. Running out of patience, I decided to call his. My name is Harper. I'm 29 years old. My dad runs a company, and I joined it after graduating from university. I'm still working there as an employee. Even though I'm the boss's daughter, I'm just a regular employee. I don't want to be treated specially because of my family, and my dad has the same policy. He never spoiled me. So, my hiring wasn't a case of nepotism. I went through the same exams and interviews as everyone else and was hired through the proper channels. I live with my husband, who is the same age as me. Thomas works for a client of my dad's company, and we met when I was assigned to work with his company. Thomas, friendly from the start, didn't change his attitude even after he found out I was the boss's daughter and continued to talk to me casually. That made him even more attractive to me, and we started dating. 2 years after we started dating, he proposed. Will you marry me? I'll cherish you forever. Yes, of course. I look forward to it. Thomas, blushing with nervousness as he presented the ring, was so endearing that I gladly accepted his proposal. That's how we decided to get married. I have a best friend from elementary school, Amelia. Amelia and I can talk about anything. Honestly, I'm not good at socializing. Being known as the boss's daughter meant that people often avoided me. But she never cared about my family background and was the only one who spoke to me just like anyone else. Harper is just Harper. It doesn't matter that your dad is the boss, she would say, staying friends with me. Thank you, Amelia. I'm so glad you're here. Her presence was truly comforting to me. When Thomas and I decided to get married, she was the first person I told. We've decided to get married. Wow, congratulations! You guys are perfect for each other. I'm so happy for you. Really, congratulations. Thank you, Amelia. I'm so happy. This one's on me today. She was genuinely happy for us and celebrated our news. We then formally announced our engagement to both our families and received blessings from everyone. I was also well liked by my in-laws, leading to a happy marriage without any issues. However, about a year into our marriage, Thomas started coming home late more frequently. Huh? Are you working overtime again today? Yeah, sorry. There's been a lot of trouble at work lately. I see. I wanted to have children as soon as possible, but he didn't seem very cooperative, and I gradually became frustrated with him. One day, I decided to have lunch with Amelia after a long time. I vented to Amelia about him. Thomas has been coming home late lately, and it seems like he doesn't want kids. I really want to start a family. That sounds tough. But maybe he is just really busy with work. As we talked, we enjoyed a delicious lunch. After a while, actually, I've been seeing someone I like, Amelia shared. Curious. Really? Who is it? Do I know him? I asked. She dodged the question, making me even more curious. I kept asking about him, and Amelia finally said, "He's kind and good at conversation." But for some reason, she looked a bit sad. I told her I was cheering for her and tried to cheer her up. That night, I talked to Thomas about Amelia. Amelia seems to have someone she likes, but she seemed a bit off. Can we talk to her together sometime? Huh? Oh. If it goes well, how about a double date with us and her couple, the four of us? I'm not so sure about that. To my suggestion, he unusually showed a reluctance. Huh? No? That's rare for you to say. Well, yeah. Just not feeling it, I guess. He usually likes hanging out with lots of friends, so I thought he'd be up for it, but for some reason, he wasn't keen on the idea. After that, he started avoiding conversations about Amelia. As our anniversary approached, Thomas and I had a day off and decided to book a fancy dinner that we rarely go to. We don't usually eat out at such expensive places, but I was really looking forward to our special anniversary. Right, I need to pick out an outfit for the restaurant. I eagerly awaited the day. On our anniversary, I was in a happy mood from the morning, humming as I prepared breakfast. Then Thomas got up, but for some reason, he was wearing his suit to go to work. It was supposed to be our day off. Thomas? What's going on? Today's our day off, right? Sorry. Something came up at work. I'll make it back in time for our dinner reservation. A workday on our holiday? Yeah. Sorry, gotta rush off now. He said this and hurried off to work without even eating breakfast. As night fell, just around the time of our restaurant reservation, I got a sudden cancellation call from him. Harper, I'm so sorry. Work's not done, and I'm still at the office. I can't make it tonight. I'll make it up to you, I promise. I sighed, having given up hope. Okay. I'll call the restaurant to cancel. No, I feel bad making you do that, Harper. It's my fault, so I'll call the restaurant. You're really going to cancel? What are you talking about? I'll call right after we hang up. It should still be possible to cancel. Hey, Thomas. Can you look behind you? As I said this, he turned around, and our eyes met. I was actually in front of the restaurant and had seen his arm in arm with a woman, about to enter the restaurant. His eyes widened in shock, and his face turned pale. Why are you here? He hurriedly tried to hide the woman beside him, but it was too late. I knew who the woman was. I can't believe Thomas and Amelia were cheating on me. That woman was Amelia. It's not like that. It just happened to be, we met there by chance. It's definitely not cheating. Believe me. To meet by chance and enter the restaurant we reserved for our anniversary. Ah, stop with the poor excuses. I saw you arm in arm. He flustered, couldn't argue back as I had caught him red-handed. And I know you've been with her all day after claiming to work. What the hell? Are you stalking me? That's creepy. He started yelling, accusing me of being a stalker as if he had nowhere else to turn. I never thought you'd be such a stalker woman. That's an invasion of privacy. He continued to yell desperately, finding no other point to argue. She looked troubled and avoided eye contact with me. Then, a man stood next to me. At that moment, Thomas shut his mouth, his face turning pale with cold sweat. I'm disappointed in you. The man, sighing heavily while looking at Thomas, was Martin. Martin. That man was his boss, Martin. I had tried calling him several times as our reservation time approached without hearing from him, but his cell phone was unreachable, so I called his office. The person who answered the phone was Thomas's boss, Martin. When I asked to speak to him, he's already left for the day, went out drinking with a client. Martin told me. A client? Do you know which client? When I asked, he mentioned it was my workplace. I hadn't heard about any of this from Thomas, so I fell silent. actually. Then Martin started to speak. It turns out Martin had received several reports from other employees about Thomas frequently sneaking out during work to meet with a woman. So far, it's just reports, and there's no concrete evidence. So, I wasn't sure if it was true or not, but I thought it was necessary to clarify the truth. Is that so? Then, I'll accompany you to the restaurant my husband is likely to visit tonight. Given that today is our anniversary and I had made a reservation at a restaurant, it was easy to guess what Thomas intended if he mentioned a meeting with a client, as he said. He agreed to my suggestion, and we hid near the entrance of the fancy restaurant, waiting for Thomas to arrive. That's when Thomas and Amelia appeared, arm in arm, unaware of anything, heading into the restaurant. Since she isn't our employee, I can prove that my husband's claim of having a meeting with our company was a lie. Moreover, her workplace has no connection whatsoever with his company. This also revealed that the expenses he claimed for the meeting and his absence from work for unrelated activities were fraudulent. The reports from other employees were true, then. You've been frequently sneaking out to meet with this lady even during work hours. Martin sternly confronted him. Martin, I'm terribly sorry. He desperately apologized to Martin. Just got carried away. I'm sincerely sorry. It won't happen again. Please forgive me. Martin sighed in exasperation at his response. Do you think theft of company funds due to a whim is excusable? If you think an apology is enough, you've entirely missed the gravity of the situation. What's going to happen to me now? He was on the verge of tears. I can't decide on my own. Your case will be reported to the higher-ups, and official disciplinary action will be communicated later. I'll take my leave now. With that, Martin left. Martin, please wait, Martin. He frantically got up to follow Martin, but stumbled and fell. He fell spectacularly. A pitiful sight indeed. From his fallen position, he began to yell at me. Harper! This is your fault. Now, my position at the company will be compromised. You shouldn't have meddled. How is this my fault? Isn't it all your own doing? It's your fault. Everything is your fault. Ignoring his ranting, I turned to Amelia. Amelia! Hearing my voice, she shivered. Why did you have cheating with him? You were so happy for our marriage. Her face twisted in response. That was all an act. I was actually frustrated. I've been in love with him since the first time I met him. Even knowing he was your boyfriend, I couldn't give him up. That's no excuse for cheating. I thought you were my friend. I was overwhelmed with a sense of betrayal. Humph. I never considered you a friend. I was only nice to you because you're rich, thinking I might use that to my advantage someday. That's how you've been thinking? Her confession filled me with sadness, anger, and various other emotions. Then, something in me snapped, and I resolved never to forgive you guys. Thomas, Amelia, I will never forgive you both. Be prepared. I declared, glaring at them. So what? Your threats don't scare me. That's right. What can you do? They challenged me back. I was shocked they had been hiding their true selves. I felt bitter about my inability to judge people correctly. Suddenly, I realized our argument had attracted a crowd. What's going on? It seems those two were having an affair. The onlookers whispered among themselves, and feeling the pressure, they quickly left the scene. Left alone, I entered the restaurant and apologized for causing a disturbance at the entrance. Considering having dinner alone, I was granted permission to invite someone else, so I decided to call Dad and have dinner together. What's the rush? Isn't today your anniversary? Yeah, sorry for the suddenness, Dad. Actually, I decided to tell Dad everything. Dad listened quietly until the end, and after hearing my story, he sighed deeply, furious, mentioning he would reconsider dealings with Thomas's company. Then, "It's been tough on you." He comforted me. "Dad, I'm sorry for this mess. There's nothing for you to apologize for. Thank you. I'm going to divorce him." Hearing my decision, Dad nodded strongly. "If there's anything I can do to help, please tell me." That's what he said. Subsequent to the events, Thomas faced the consequences of misusing company funds under the guise of entertainment expenses and was penalized with a salary cut for the times he sneaked out. Naturally, he was demoted, resulting in a substantial decrease in his salary. Furthermore, his cheating led to deteriorating relations with a client, branding him as a villain within the company and subjecting him to cold stares from colleagues. His request for a transfer was granted, but even at the new branch, bad rumors followed, ultimately leading to his resignation. Dad felt relieved to continue the business relationship after the change of contact person. Thomas and I quickly proceeded with our divorce. I had assumed he would immediately remarry Amelia. "He's fallen from grace and looks pathetic." But she left him quickly, stating, despite her previous confessions of love for Thomas to me, her departure was swift. Soon after, Thomas reached out to me, seeking reconciliation. "I was truly wrong. You're the only one for me, Harper. Let's mend our relationship. Amelia left me as soon as I quit my job. She's the worst. Come on, Harper, let's get back together." I refuse. Do not contact me again. Additionally, I will soon be seeking compensation through a lawyer for the divorce proceedings against you and Amelia. After making my stance clear, I unilaterally ended the call. Despite repeated attempts from him to reach out, I ignored them and eventually blocked his number to avoid further annoyance. I also blocked Amelia's number as a precaution. And true to my declaration, I had a lawyer demand compensation for the cheating from them. The lawyer was a skilled one recommended through my dad's connections. I was grateful for having such an excellent lawyer. According to the lawyer, both were panicking, despairing that they could never pay such an amount. But perhaps they hated the idea of going to court. They paid the full amount without any reduction, and I completely severed ties with both of them. I don't know how they managed to pay everything, but they likely turned to their parents or took out loans. I have no knowledge of their whereabouts after that. I no longer had even a shred of interest in those two. Meanwhile, I've been supporting Dad and working hard. The wounds from the divorce have completely healed, and I'm able to live each day with energy. Matching cutlery. I made it from scratch myself. After the wedding, Sierra, my mother-in-law, said as she gifted us 2 pieces of cutlery. The ones engraved with my and my husband's names were so beautifully made, they didn't seem like an amateur's work. "Beautiful, thank you." I thanked her, and she smiled warmly. "Make sure you use this cutlery every day, no matter what." It's a promise. I'm Emma. I'm 30 years old and newlywed. Until last year, I was living in an apartment with Steven, my boyfriend of 2 years older, preparing for our marriage. I met him through my boss at work. He was a subordinate at the company my boss worked at every day, and apparently, my boss had been fond of him since he joined. Though introduced as a fun guy, he was more reserved than others. Not exactly shy, but our conversations were smooth when we were alone, making me think he was a good listener. Being somewhat of a chatterbox, I found my time with him to be comfortable. Both of us having a desire to marry, we started living together less than 6 months after beginning our relationship. At this time, His mom suggested he include me in their living arrangement. However, he refused. He had always lived at home due to his mom's strong wishes, but he wanted to spend his life with me after getting married, he said. I realized this was what he had been referring to when he asked me about living at the in-laws' house. Honestly, I wasn't keen on the idea. I had only met the in-laws a few times, but they seemed difficult, especially Sierra, who didn't seem to think highly of me. She never commented on my appearance, but she would scrutinize me, commenting on my clothes or possessions. That shirt, the hem is a bit discolored. Don't you check these things before going out? Which brand is that bag? It doesn't match what you're wearing at all. Have you looked in the mirror? It was supposed to be advice, but her harsh words and my lack of resources to keep up made me feel uncomfortable around Sierra. Therefore, I wanted our apartment to be as far from the in-laws' house as possible, and though I never said it, I think he noticed. Having never lived together before, I was anxious about potential troubles, but he, despite his background, was quite efficient. I always wanted to move out, so I made sure I could do all household chores. Just never had a big enough reason to leave home until now. Neither of us was particularly skilled at housekeeping, so we divided the chores and set rules. Both of us worked, so our time together was from evening to morning. On days we both could come home early, we'd enjoy a quiet bar or a late movie, living comfortably. However, soon after moving in together, something unexpected happened. Packages from Sierra began to arrive frequently. Not only for him, but also for me. Most contained handmade crafts. All by Sierra. The materials were often unfamiliar plants, assembled or carved into items. Some looked rough or slightly damaged, but were well made and beautiful. I displayed them around the entrance and living room, appreciating the gesture. But he didn't seem pleased. She's always been into making things, which is fine, but it just accumulates and becomes a hassle. If it gets too much, don't hesitate to tell me, and I'll talk to Mom. I enjoyed these items and knew Sierra didn't dislike me, so I couldn't bring myself to throw them away. Gifts weren't just crafts, but also food items, which often looked and smelled of poor quality, making me hesitant to eat them. Though I didn't want to waste her efforts, letting the food spoil felt wrong too. When I brought it up with him, he frowned. He mentioned that her had been doing things like this for a while. Sending spoiled food to her friends too, so he doubted it was harassment but found it odd himself. We agreed to throw away anything that was spoiled. The day after that conversation, he sighed and vented to me. I called Mom about the sweets, and she just kept saying it can't be helped. They're homemade without preservatives, so of course, they spoil easily. She even said living together would solve such issues and didn't even apologize. It seems no matter how many times he's brought it up, her stance remains unchanged. Even when asked not to send sweets, she'd argue she made too much to eat themselves. So, we ended up throwing away all food-related items and kept only the crafts. About a year later, we moved forward with our marriage and had our wedding. We meticulously prepared for this once-in-a-lifetime event. And it was a grand success. I felt the happiest I've ever been. We planned to have an after-party with friends of mine and my husband. Separating from our parents at the venue and watching them get into their taxis. After sending off my parents, Sierra called me. Emma, thank you for today. You looked beautiful. It's not much, but would you accept this? I prepared it for today. She handed me two similarly sized packages. One with Steven's name and the other with mine. It's matching cutlery. Open it and see. She seemed unusually cheerful, which made me a bit nervous, but with my husband and father-in-law John nearby, I unwrapped it. Indeed, each box contained meticulously placed cutlery. with our names engraved on the handles. I made these myself. I hope they bring you both happiness in your marriage. Please use them. Thank you, they're beautiful. They're made from precious materials. They'll discolor in sunlight, so best to store them away. She hurriedly closed the lid and handed it to me. And they're fragile, so be careful. They might survive a small drop, but don't let them stack with other dishes or cutlery. But the more you use them, the more they'll fit your hand. Please use them daily. Right then, the taxi for the in-laws arrived. We thanked them again and watched until they were out of sight. Then headed to the dining bar for our after-party. Among the after-party guests were mutual friends and friends of each of us. Initially reserved, the group quickly warmed up to each other, being of similar ages and with alcohol flowing, creating a fun atmosphere. I felt relaxed, chatting with various people. Then, something a high school friend had caught my eye. It was when the shop was about to close, and we were settling the bill. I pointed at a wooden strap on her wallet and said, "I have something similar at home. It's beautiful and I really like it." As she replied, her eyes lit up. "You're into this too?" "I've recently gotten into handmade crafts. A boutique opened near my house, and I've been stopping by." I laughed, looking a little embarrassed. "I got mine from my husband's mom. She makes them, and they're so beautiful that I display them at home." "Wow, that's nice. Maybe I should commission her to make something for me." Encouraged by her interest, I showed her photos of the crafts displayed in my home. She carefully looked through the overall shots of the living room and shelf, as well as individual photos I had taken for an album. Then, her smile froze, and she suddenly looked tense, frowning at a particular photo. "What's wrong? Is there something bad in the photo?" I tried to joke, but her expression remained serious. "Are you really aware of all the properties and meanings behind these materials?" Her question, laden with implications, scared me, and I asked why she was asking such a thing. She then showed me a website she had been studying recently and sent the URL to my phone. Although hesitant, she said it would be best to check it out just in case anything happens, so I promised to look at the site once I got home. By the time I arrived home, it was already deep into the night. Stephen was drunker than I had ever seen him, having left his wallet at the bar and gone back to retrieve it, which is why I got home a bit earlier. I was about to take a shower after sweating a lot when suddenly the home phone rang loudly. It was quiet outside, unlike during the day, which made my heart jump. Wondering who could be calling at such an hour, I cautiously looked at the display and saw it was a call from John's cell phone. He doesn't drink, so him calling while drunk was out of the question. It must be something urgent, I thought, and quickly picked up the receiver. "Emma? I heard my wife gave you some cutlery today. Do not use it. Throw it all away, box and all." I was bewildered by his sudden outburst and, being drunk, couldn't respond. Then my phone rang. It was my husband. After telling John about my husband's call, John seemed to regain his composure and said, "Just listen to what my son has to say after this. He'll explain the reason then," and hung up. After the call from Steve dropped, I called him back. He answered the phone in a surprisingly sober tone, given how drunk he had been earlier. "Emma, I'm on my way home now, so wait there for me. And, did you hear about the cutlery from Dad? Don't touch it, just throw it away. No, don't throw it away. Put it in a plastic bag and don't touch it." He said it with such emphasis that I firmly replied. After hanging up, I looked at the paper bag I had been holding. Inside were the matching cutlery sets Sierra had given me. I then packed them into a plastic bag, along with the paper bag, and waited for him to return. The stress of knowing something was happening without knowing the details was terrible. Thinking of something to distract myself, I remembered a craft site a friend had recommended. There was still some time before he would arrive, so I decided to browse it. The site featured many items, both those sent by Sierra and others, and I checked them against the ones I had in my room. The materials and textures used were completely different, but I noticed something common in all of them. They could all be considered bad omens if interpreted in a certain way. For example, scissors adorned with clovers sent right after our wedding. The language of flowers for clover is revenge, and scissors, symbolizing cutting ties, are a no-go as a wedding gift, the site warned. I thought it was just a lack of research on my part, but everything she had sent had bad flower languages or was considered inappropriate for celebrations. I wanted to believe it was a coincidence, but I couldn't help thinking she had malicious intent with everything she sent. I was curious about the cutlery she gave me today, but I didn't feel like opening the tightly tied plastic bag again. It must have had some bad patterns on it, I thought, feeling down. Finally, he came home. He had also received a call from John, and after calling a taxi from the shop, he came straight here. It had already been decided between my husband and John to go to the in-laws' house, and I was led by my husband into the taxi. In the quiet of the car, I showed my husband the photos of the crafts and the information from the site. As he looked, his expression gradually hardened, and he seemed quietly angry. Then he told me in a low voice, asking me to calm down. "That cutlery is poisoned." Upon arriving at the in-laws' house and entering, John greeted us with a solemn expression. Sierra was inside, hunched over and crying, her eyes swollen. As soon as she saw me, "It's all your fault. You've always been in the way." She glared and spat out. I had never been subjected to such negative emotions from someone in my life, and I just stood there, frozen. But I knew I couldn't just stay silent, so I asked her, my voice trembling. "Is it true that the cutlery was made using branches from a poisonous tree?" "Oh, you don't know the language of flowers, but you knew about oleander." With her eyes swollen from crying, admitted it nonchalantly. Oleander is apparently a tree whose roots, bark, stems, and flowers are all poisonous. There have been poisoning incidents, and in France, there have even been cases leading to death. Despite its poison, oleander is strong against car exhaust and air pollution, and is sometimes planted in parks. It's only dangerous to ingest or eat, so it's commonly planted because there's no issue just looking at it. In fact, oleander was planted in the in-laws' house garden, and John looked forward to its beautiful blooms every year. However, a few months ago, when the flowers should have been in full bloom, hardly any blossomed. Wondering why, he discovered that a large branch of the oleander had been broken off. When he hurriedly asked her, she said she took it because the flowers were beautiful, and him, aware of the toxicity of oleander, panicked. Upon entering her workshop, he was speechless to see many pieces of cutlery. She easily admitted to making cutlery from the branch when confronted. When mentioned the toxicity, she laughed it off, saying that oleander was the only branch of the right thickness available, and she took precautions like ventilation and gloves, so it wasn't a problem. After being strongly advised by John, she disposed of a large amount of cutlery and promised never to make it again. And so, she stopped making cutlery from oleander. John had almost forgotten about it, but the topic came up during a family gathering after a wedding, reminding him. Making matching cutlery by hand really shows how skilled you are. Hearing this, he hurriedly checked the garden. The large oleander branches were gone, and in Sierra's workshop, he found a trash bag wrapped unusually securely in plastic. Inside the clear bag were lots of wood shavings and thick rubber gloves. After hastily sending the relatives away and confronting her alone, she broke down crying. However, He could no longer trust her after she broke her promise not to make cutlery from oleander again. He hurriedly contacted my husband and me, leading to the current situation. I actually wanted to kill you, but I didn't want to become a criminal over someone like you. If this cutlery could make you suffer without killing you, that would have been enough. Sierra, with her eyes red, glared at me and answered in a low voice, seemingly without any excuse. It turns out, she couldn't stand the thought of Steve getting married, let alone to me. Thus, she never approved of his living alone and deliberately invited any women he was involved with to her home, serving them spoiled sweets to drive them away. Naturally, he never got married under those circumstances. Sierra, thinking selfishly that it looked bad for him to still be single after turning 30, decided she would let the next woman be. That next woman was me. Steve, wanting to live together immediately, packed his things and told her, "I don't see the point in living with parents before we're even married," and stormed out of the in-laws' house. That's why she had such a negative impression of me, and I understood the reason behind her attitude. "I thought you'd come back home after getting married, but you didn't even contact me. I said I would live with you, so you should have just quietly moved in. Mom, I've told you many times I don't want to live together. Why would you think Emma would want to live with a mom as intense as you? I didn't even tell her about the cohabitation to spare her from that." He let out a long breath as if to contain his anger and glared at Sierra. I was annoyed by Mom's control but cared for her as a parent and tried to fulfill her wishes as much as possible. But I can't think of someone who tried to kill Emma as a parent. Sorry, but I won't see you again. Why? Why would you say such terrible things? It's all your fault. You seduced my child. Her hysterical voice overlapped with Steve's cold one. John stopped Sierra, who was still trying to blame me for everything, even now. "Stop it. It's embarrassing. Emma, I'm so sorry about this mess. It seems like disowning is the only option left. I'm sorry for the late hour, but please go home and rest." Are you siding with this woman too? John held back her and urged us to leave now. Unable to keep up with the conversation unfolding before me, I ended up going home with him. Exhausted from the whirlwind of a day, I fell asleep as soon as I got home. And in the morning, I worried about what to do next. Then I got a call from John, telling me he was taking Sierra to the police. When I called the police station, they said it was a mother-in-law and daughter-in-law conflict and told us to talk it out calmly. But what she did is no different from murder. They said it would be easier to act if we had evidence, so we're at the police station for that and other procedures. You might get calls from the police, but I hope you can cooperate. His words were a relief, as I was afraid this family issue might be dismissed. Eventually, Sierra was arrested. The trigger was her knowledge of the toxicity of oleander, the extent of this knowledge, and her deliberate act of giving me cutlery made from it. Sierra insisted she was innocent, but the evidence John gathered, including oleander branches from her workshop and the thick rubber gloves she would never touch directly, along with a powerful ventilator, was decisive. Whether there was intent to kill or what the verdict would be depended on the upcoming trial, but for now, the issue between me and she was resolved with her arrest. We decided to move to a new home, leaving the spacious house we had. It's near my childhood home, and Sierra knows nothing about it. Gifts from her that might serve as evidence of malice were handed over to the police, and everything else was disposed of. We changed our mobile numbers, and John alone stayed in touch, having apparently finalized his divorce from Sierra. John, unable to pay compensation on Sierra's behalf, covered our moving and purification costs, and sold the in-laws' house to enjoy living alone for the first time in a while. Later, I became pregnant and gave birth to a healthy daughter. Sometimes we invite John over, and we're living peacefully.